What I'm trying to do in Do It Tomorrow is to give a very simple system by which you can actually say at the end of the day, I have finished my work. Obviously there will be more work coming up the next day and the day after that, but as far as the work which is due now, the aim of the system is that you'll be able to say I've done it. So whether you finish at 11 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or 8 o'clock at night, you can go away home and say, that's it. I've done all the work I needed to do today. And I think that's something which is very appealing to people because it gives you a real sense of closure and of being on top of your work. One of the things I've noticed is that when I'm on top of my work, it gives me a lot of energy. It's when you fall behind that you start getting overwhelmed and you start getting stressed and you tend to feel, and you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders. When you're on top of something, even if it's something you don't particularly like, if you're right on top of it, then you've got this tremendous energy. What I advise in Do It Tomorrow as a replacement for a to-do list is what I call a closed list. An example of a closed list would be a checklist. If you write out a checklist of actions you need to take before you go on holiday, say, that's a closed list because there's only a certain number of actions you have to take. It's not suddenly going to get longer. You know what those actions are going to be, unless there's an emergency or something like that. And so what I advise people to do is to use the system of closed lists as far as possible. So to take a very simple example, email. Now what most people tend to do with email is the email comes in during the course of the day, up comes that little message saying, you've got email, and so they go to their inbox, they look at the email, 5 emails have come in, and they look at 2 of them and deal with them immediately because they were easy or because there was something they wanted to do or because they were from a friend or whatever it might be. And the other 3 get left for later. When does that later come? Well, any time between now and the end of the world, basically. So what's happening is that you have actioned 2 of them and 3 are left floating in limbo. And then up comes that little message again, and another 5 emails have come in. And you do exactly the same thing again. So you've actioned 4 emails, and you've got 6 emails in limbo. And this can go on all day. And it's a very unsatisfactory way of dealing with things. Now, what I advise people to do is whenever they check email, is to clear all the email that's come in since their last check. Now, the best way of doing that is to have specific times for checking email. You can do it once a day or twice a day or 3 times a day, but whenever you do it, clear them as emails. I mean, you're not necessarily going to clear all the action that comes out of them, but you've dealt with them as emails. And just a simple little change like that can make an enormous difference to how efficiently you deal with email. I think for compulsive email checkers who want to check their email every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes, the rule is the same. Every time you check it, you must clear everything that's come in. Another word for a closed list is a batch. You batch things up. So you have a batch of emails and you clear them. You can do that too with telephone calls. You have a batch of telephone calls you need to make, so you clear them. Rather than just make telephone calls haphazardly throughout the day. You can do it with paperwork that comes in. A batch of papers sitting in your in tray. This is the stuff that's come in during the day. You clear the lot before you go on to anything else. What I encourage people to do is to actually put a buffer between themselves and incoming tasks, incoming emails, incoming paper, incoming phone calls, whatever it may be, of a day. That's why we call it Do It Tomorrow. And what I suggest to people is that they save up the incoming work for a day and do it the following day. Obviously, if some things may be so urgent that they have to be dealt with the same day, but you'd be surprised how little that is in most cases. I have a very simple sequence for dealing with backlogs. It doesn't matter what sort of backlog it is. First thing is isolate the backlog. Now with email, that's easy. You start a new folder called backlog, you highlight everything in your inbox and drag it into the backlog folder. And then you have a nice, new, brilliant, empty inbox. Fantastic. With paper, you gather all your paper together from all the little piles you've got all over the place and your in-tray, oblique pending tray, and get it all together in one big pile and hide it somewhere. You can put it in a drawer, you can put it in a folder, you can put it in a filing cabinet, or in extreme cases you can put it in a room. And it's out of sight, out of mind. Again, you've got a clear, empty inbox, in tray. Whatever the backlog is, get it, isolate it, get it away, get it out of sight, out of mind, so that you're making a fresh start. Now, the second thing you have to do is then get your system for dealing with new stuff right. Because if you don't get your system for dealing with new stuff right, you're always going to be building up a fresh backlog. And so if you implement something like the batching system, the 24-hour buffer, which I've been talking about, that can help enormously to help you, to keep you up to date with your work. And the question you always have to be asking yourself is, if my backlog had completely disappeared, would I be able to keep up with my work? And if the answer is no, then you've got to work at looking at why that's the case and cutting it back until you can say a yes to that. Okay, so once you've got the new work ready, you've got that sorted out, then you can go to stage 3, which is start clearing the backlog. Now, as I said a moment ago, the backlog can only get smaller if you have closed it properly. And in fact, if you did nothing to it at all, it would still tend to shrivel up and go away, because some of it would just die, some of it someone would start screaming about, so it becomes new work, and some of it you begin to wonder why you ever put it in, why you ever thought you ought to be doing it anyway. So it will tend to get smaller anyway. But even if you just start chipping at it, it will vanish remarkably quickly. So that's the way to get rid of a backlog. So what I say is, don't wait to implement my system until you've caught up. Implement my system, and then you will be able to catch up.